Hello and welcome to another delightful episode of Ebenchekwa, the Safe Space podcast brought to you by the Wama Media Development Foundation. In this episode, I am joined by Reverend Canon Ifeanyi Agu, the priest in charge, Anglican Church, Monarch Avenue. Thank you so much, sir, and welcome to Ebenchekwa, the Safe Space podcast. Today also, we're delving into an aspect of sexual and gender-based violence, and we know that this is an ever-relevant topic. Many experiences are coming to the fore, people's personal stories, even belief systems and cultural practices, are coming that shows us how relevant this issue is. So we're looking at the aspect of it, which is what I would call believability. Sometimes incidences of sexual abuse comes up and there is doubt, there are stereotypical narratives already, and people already take a stance without knowing the substance of it. So I would like to start with the question, in terms of stereotypes, why are men the chief suspect in events of sexual abuse or harassment? You come into a room and let's take a room full of women and then two men, right? And there is the allegation of harassment or sexual abuse. Automatically, everybody is almost certain that it's the man or the men in the room who are guilty, and this constitutes some sort of stereotype. So why is that, and how do you think that contributes to the conversation on SGBV?
Well, I think that generalization has to stop. It has to stop culturally and religious-wise. Religious bodies should be able to speak to both gender and encourage them to do the right thing. And in cases of, investigation or counseling or trying to look into issues, not coming to look at issues, bearing in mind that the man is already a suspect. Like, I was in a meeting where a couple came to a pastor, in quotes, to discuss their issue bordering on gender-based violence with the pastor. As I sat and I was observing, I noticed that the pastor was already biased. I noticed that the pastor, the way he was responding, already feels that the man was guilty. Yes, he had taken a side. But later, when that same issue came to me, I observed that both of them were wrong. That conclusion that the man was the person who was at fault was wrong. Both of them were wrong. So I think that it's high time we stopped that generalization. Recently, I know someone that for some years now he's been having issues with the wife. So the first conclusion was that he was at fault. That was the first conclusion. So people that were staying close where they were staying or where they live were saying that the man was the person at fault. But recently, the same people who said the man was at fault recently said now they know that it was not fault of the man, that it was fault of the woman.
But they've already
yes. So that is it. So it's high time we stop that generalization and hasty conclusions.
Indeed, I completely agree with you. And while we were speaking, you mentioned bias, how people are almost naturally biased when these issues are brought before them, whether as an adjudicator in the matter or you're just empathizing with the parties concerned. So I'm looking at also, so when women come up with stories or personal accounts of abuse of that nature, sexual or gender-based, there is also this sort of bias among society members that before a woman can be believed, she would have to prove her character. Sometimes people tell you that they are raped, and the first question coming from somebody, in fact, there are cases where even the police would ask you, you sleep with that person on the regular, right? Especially when it's spousal rape or it happens, within your partner, with your partner, and people already cast doubt at the character of the woman as if the only people who, should be pitied or taken seriously when they come with cases of sexual abuse or, gender abuse are people who are completely innocent, completely clean, completely pure, whatever, they mean by that. So how do you see that?
Well, of a truth, it did not start today. If you remember the case of Jesus, the woman that was caught in adultery, they didn't bring the man. They brought only the woman. And Jesus, speaking by wisdom, instead of judging the case, asked them a question: if you have never committed any sin, be the first to cast the stone. And all of them disappeared. So, of a truth, it didn't start now, but such things should not continue. People should not quickly go into cases without necessarily looking into the cases properly and jumping into conclusions without understanding the case, without understanding how what happened. There is this belief, for instance, that in case a girl is raped, that it was because, in fact, you see some people advise a girl, the way you advise it, if you are raped now, you are the cause.
Yeah, that's a very prominent statement.
You should not, and sometimes if a girl comes into the house and complains that I was raped, the parents may start beating the girl first and say, why will you not be raped when you dress like this? And invariably, the perpetrator is left.
Yeah.
It ought not to be so. It ought not to be so. So we shouldn't be jumping like that to draw conclusions. Cases should be looked into clearly to know what transpired and how it transpired, who caused what happened, and then such cases should be judged like that or looked into like that, not necessarily jumping into conclusions because of the way people dress or because of the gender of people. That ought not to be so.
Indeed, I cannot, agree more, because as you mentioned, even in families, when women come, with accounts, or girls with, personal accounts of how they are raped, first question is, they question her dressing, her character over time, and it's almost as if she has been asking for it. In fact, we say yes, that some dresses are labeled as asking for it, and you wonder what that means. But I want to also ask, there is also another form of gender.
Okay, sorry, I'm going to cut you in.
Yeah.
If I'm the person visiting such cases, like there was a day one of my mentees came to see me, and she came to complain that she was raped. And by the time she started explaining, it happened that it was another person that I knew raped her. So I invited both of them, and I had to scold the young man. In fact, the only thing I didn't do was to use Canon Agu.
Yeah.
I spoke to him, told him how he has done the wrong thing. After speaking to him, I turned to the girl in question and said, were you tied? Why didn't you shout? So what I'm trying to say in MS is that if I'm the one that is to intervene in such a case or such an issue, I don't usually take it one side. If there is any way the other person also contributed, I will as well address it instead of just looking at one person, because sometimes the other person may have contributed. If, for instance, you see a couple, someone comes to say, my husband beats me, and the truth is that the husband beats the woman, but then when you look into the case well, you may discover that the woman first of all pushed the man. So in as much as the man didn't do the right thing, under no circumstance should you beat your wife. You are not permitted to beat your wife, but I will as well tell the woman, you ought not to have pushed him. So we should look at it like that. I think if we start addressing such issues like that, it will help to limit this bias and generalization.
Okay, but to take us back a little into that context of sometimes people pushing people to act in such a way that they unleash violence on them or aggression or even harm them. So it's still undressing. Some people would say that when African men, want to use how a woman dressed as a reason, for their raping them or harassing them, sexually, the question would also arise, but what happens in the West where, the kind of dressing that we label as indecent is the norm, right? And then we don't have cases of these harassment there. It's not like the men there are not triggered by what they see, and they don't go about raping people or harassing people as we would do here because somebody is dressed in a certain way. So I want to understand, how do you perceive, dressing, the stereotype around dressing as, being something that could trigger or cause a person to act a certain way?
Well, the issue with the countries, some of the countries you mentioned, is because of how active the law is. So even if the men there would have misbehaved, when they remember that by the time the law begins to deal with them, that they will not escape the law, they will just behave. It's just like a thief coming into a place and you notice that there are cameras all around. The knowledge of the fact that there are cameras all around will make the person to behave well. But then the truth of the matter is that dressings can provoke people, can stimulate people sexually. Why I'm saying this, something happened some years ago. I came to see one of my boss, the person I was serving then, and sometimes there's a way the secretary dresses. So the secretary was dressed in such a way, and one of the sons of the man came to see the father, and the secretary bent down to pick something. So I just looked at the young man and around his trouser, I noticed that he was having some reactions. And that reaction is because of what he was seeing. The truth of the matter is that men are moved by what they see. That's just the truth of the matter. But for the countries where you quoted, the law makes people to try to caution, but that doesn't mean there are still such cases. But here, where sometimes the people involved may not speak out, the people involved may not have the funds, evidence, or even the funds to pursue the case. Because if you want, even if you go to the police, there's no how you can go to the police under normal circumstances. You're not spending money on something. So that's why it's still continuing. But whether dressing is capable of provoking people or stimulating people sexually, it is possible. I'm telling you this as a man, it is possible. But that does not justify. People must learn to have self-control. You don't say because someone has dressed. In fact, if you know what, if you are, for me, as a responsible man, when you come across someone that is not properly dressed, you look away. Because the problem starts arising when you have a second look.
Yes.
Once you have a second look, law sets in, and once law sets in, your sexual emotions will start acting. So that is it.
Yes, I mean, I think that really, speaks to the point, because clearly, as you've said, dressing really can be a factor in these things, but it is still no excuse, as you've concluded. I also want to ask, in terms of, women being emotional beings, as they are mainly described. Most people would think of the man as being more rational than the woman, and the woman, being more emotional. I think that's for the psychologist, to decide that. But with that assumption or reality, the case may be, sometimes in the cases of abuse, that stereotype that women are often emotional people, dramatic people, it makes sometimes society to dismiss cases of abuse as the woman simply being a woman, overreacting or misunderstanding something because of her emotional state. So how does that reinforce this behavior of abuse, and how does it contribute to SGBV?
Well, I believe that it contributes because because you said someone is emotional and dismiss the fact that someone else has done something wrong, you are invariably encouraging the person to continue. As a pastor, I've had cause to counsel people who are having issues of violence. The last one, which borders on the same thing we're talking about, sexual and gender-based violence. A woman called me and was crying on the phone, my husband is beating me, my husband is beating me. So I called the man. I said, is it true that you are beating your wife? Instead of the man answering me yes or no, what he said is that I was talking to my wife and she walked out on me. Imagine, I was talking to my wife and she walked out on me. So for him, for the fact that it's a woman should not walk out on the husband. If a man walks out on the wife will not drag him back.
The wife not beat him.
Yes, under normal circumstances. But if a woman walks out on the husband, she's inviting trouble. So all of that are still part of the stereotype.
When we talk about SGBV, the assumption is that, this is violence against women, forgetting that women also can be perpetrators. So how do you see the reality of women being perpetrators, and how can people also learn to understand that women can indeed be perpetrators, and by extension, if they're perpetrators, their victim can either be a man or a woman. And if their victim is a man, there is really that tendency for the man to hide. There are not many cases of men who openly share their experiences as being victims, especially when the abuser is a woman. And this happens mostly in marital spaces. There is this shame culture, this silence culture. How do you see that, women being perpetrators and men being victims?
Yes, it's possible. The truth is that cases of violence that we report that is attached to gender, such cases take place because people have not managed their anger properly, because people are hot-tempered, not managing anger properly. And then poor anger management is not attached or cannot be narrowed down to any particular gender. A man can have issues with anger management, and a woman can as well have issues with anger management. There are women that once they are provoked talking with their husbands, they slap him. And sometimes the men, they don't know how they will come out to say it, because they will feel that other people will start laughing at them, that you are not the man. What did you do? The man will not be the type who will want to give back violence for violence. And you know that once he mentioned, what did you do? You should have cut off that woman's head. So, and then we have seen it in the news, social media, even people using knife, using something a weapon to harm or hurt their partner, even from women. Such things borders on poor anger management. And that's why, again, we should not conclude that it must be the man. We should look into the issue as they are and know how to deal with it. So some women do that. And then naturally the men find it difficult to say, because they don't know. Other men will eventually laugh at them. Some people will say that woman will not survive. Some people will say that woman will go home. So but my advice is that gender-based violence should be discouraged. Do to others what you want them to do to you, whether you're a man or whether you are a woman. That should be my counsel on that.
Yeah, that's a very rich one. As we're wrapping up, I want to, ask the question of what comes with a gender. So we are also living in, a society where women are mostly appreciated for their, nature, their femininity, and more than their economic power, because clearly we're also, and that speaks to how disadvantaged women are economically in our clans, as opposed to in the Western society, where you would speak of women being more financially empowered. So here, a woman's value is mostly tied to maybe her beauty, her nature, her character, all of that. And sometimes also there is also the assumption that these things come with being a woman, those compliments even the compliments that are not really compliments, that are abusive, very abusive. Some of them are even rude, but guys, as compliments, and it's just something that comes with character. I remember working on this project, where we tried to look at men that, broke women in marketplaces. And then when we interviewed some of the men, the response was that if a man doesn't broke you, is he a woman that won't broke? And as shocking as it is, it's the belief that many people have. So how do you see this thing of the perception that abuse is something that may come with being a woman? It's expected that at some point a man would demand something of you, and expect that if his demands be met, because I think that's a really big issue in SGBV.
Well, it is often said that men are hunters.
That's one of the statements that
that men are hunters. What that means is that men, under normal circumstances, psychologically or naturally, will want to go for what they want. How do I mean? If a man sees a girl that he admires, that man is likely to say, "You're beautiful." That man is likely going to make an effort to have a form of interaction with the woman. But a woman can see a man she likes, and she will never do anything. She will never do anything.
Is that a problem?
No. Just to prove to you that somehow psychologically and naturally, you can say somehow men are and women are wired differently. A woman can be madly in love, but sit on it. But if a man is madly in love, he will take some tests. Yes. But then, oftentimes I blame women, because I've worked a lot among young people. Sometimes you ask a young girl, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Her first response will be, I see myself in my husband's house, carrying his baby and eating his money. If you take a woman,
is this perception still popular?
It is still popular. Still popular. A lot of women who get involved in relationship, young girls, they get involved in relationship not necessarily because they want somebody of the opposite sex they will be relating with, so to say, but they are looking for ATM. They are looking for someone to run their deals. So a lot of people still think like that. So a lot of the women, because of their perception and attitude to that, that's why the society still looks at women like that to a very large extent. But it's high time the women themselves should change. Something happened one day that brought a turning around to me. I was speaking to some young ladies somewhere, and I began to make some utterances. I see some of you rise to become wives of presidents, wives of bishops, and someone said, why not the president? Why not the bishop? Wow!
Yes.
I was happy. It shocked me.
Yes. Did you want to? Were you trying to get that response?
I was not.
Okay.
I was not.
Yes.
So I looked at it and said, wow, it's possible.
Indeed.
It's possible. So women need to, if you take a woman out, if you ask a woman to come, if you invite a woman, please let's see in crunches, many of them will not even come with their transport fare. Not even.
That's how we get our social media content.
Yes, and that's how also women get exposed to danger. Because the man can start saying, I'm not with cash here, let's go to the house so that I get cash. So women should start being financially independent, should start working on themselves to be economically empowered. The young girl out there who is in university, an average young girl out there, if you ask her who's in final year, her priority out of 5 things she wants is to marry a rich person. Her priority will not be to be a rich person.
Important.
No, it's important,
yes.
But in desiring to marry a rich person, you are putting yourself down. You are not bringing yourself into the picture.
Exactly, yes.
You are not.
Because you could be the rich person.
Yes.
Supposed to, yes, simply or only being the.
And that's why, because women have that, a lot of women have that mentality that the man should always be the rich person. So in a situation where a man is married and the man starts having problems financially or economically, sometimes that's how where women lead the journey of violence. Because they start talking to the man anyhow, they can hit the man, say you are useless, and so on. So we need to understand that in as much as we expect that the man should take care of the home, run the bills, but women should as well be financially empowered. There's no one that must always run the bill. When we have this understanding, it will help to limit cases of violence, especially among married people when there are issues of finances.
Indeed, I completely see that picture because, as you've said, financial empowerment, economic empowerment, these are ways that, makes a woman's value change, in society. And we're looking at how women are being, valued majorly for their physique, their bodies, as opposed to their work, their contribution to society. So if society can take responsibility to empower women and also women reprioritize, because as you said, it's also about priorities. If we can reprioritize, we can get to that point where a woman's worth is much more than her looks, and with that, certain things will.
Sorry, I want to say something more, just to prove that the women also contribute to that.
Okay.
Do you see how women dress in weddings? That is, these young girls who do ashedi.
Okay.
You see how many of them almost expose everything. You see where women and men are doing content creation. The men are properly covered and the women are not properly covered. Recently, there is a content trending on TikTok where men will be asking women, show this and show that. And they'll be doing that. They'll be doing that. A woman on live program will be raising her clothes. So the women themselves are also creating an impression as if their body is all they've got. As if their body is the selling point. So women should as well, women should talk to women, women should as well work on that. So that women should not be looked at mainly because of their body, but because of their content, because of their capacity. But when you start exposing things you ought not to expose, you want the whole attention to be on your body and not because of what you can offer because of your content. Thank you.
I think that would have been a very contentious, position, but you made the point when you said that if you keep displaying this as if it's the only thing that, matters about you, then it's only inevitable that, people will treat you also as if that's all you've got. So I think that, that's a perfect conclusion to that. Thank you so much, Reverend, for joining us on this episode. We hope to have you in our future episodes.